Logan Reed never expected his first assignment as a park ranger to feel so hollow. Pinehaven National Forest was beautiful, sure. Endless trees stretching out across the North Carolina foothills, quiet trails winding between mossy trunks, birdsong drifting lazily through the crisp air. But under all that, there was something off. It wasn't anything obvious, nothing he could put in a report. It was more like a feeling in his gut. Like the forest didn't want him there. He'd transferred out from Shenandoah last fall, looking for a fresh start after a few personal messes he didn't talk about anymore. The Pinehaven station was small, just him, a couple of field techs, and one senior ranger, Ron Hayward, a grizzled guy who'd been around the woods since before GPS was a thing. Ron was friendly enough, but there was a tightness behind his jokes, something in his eyes that didn't fully relax. On Logan's first day, Ron handed him a folded map, the kind printed decades ago and re-inked by hand. "Don't rely on your phone out here," he said. "There's no signal past the fire road. And don't go past the split near Trail 9 unless I'm with you." Logan chuckled. "Why? Ghosts?" Ron didn't laugh. He just looked at him and said, "Just don't." That night, Logan unpacked in the ranger cabin. It creaked and groaned with every gust of wind. The floorboards shifted under his weight. The place smelled like damp wood and old coffee. Still, it was peaceful. Too peaceful. He'd worked alone in the forest before. Hiked 10-mile loops solo. Slept under the stars. This wasn't that kind of solitude. It wasn't the kind you enjoy. It was the kind that watches. The next morning, Logan set out for his first patrol. It was routine. Checking trail markers, noting down any fallen branches, making sure campsites weren't trashed. Pinehaven looked normal enough in the daylight. Squirrels darted up trunks. A buck crossed the trail ahead and vanished into the brush. But something kept tugging at Logan's attention. Not a sound or a sight. Just that same quiet tightness under his ribs. Midway through the patrol, he saw it. It was just a word, carved into the bark of a tree beside Trail 7. The letters were deep and rough, but carefully done. Not fresh, not ancient either. Just old enough to be weathered and dark. Croton. Logan frowned. He traced a finger over the grooves. Whoever did it had taken their time. He pulled out his notepad, jotted down the location, and snapped a photo with his phone. No signal, just like Ron said. He'd heard the word before. Back in high school history class, maybe. Something to do with the lost colony, Roanoke. The settlers who disappeared without a trace, leaving only that single word carved into a tree. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Just gone. He finished the loop and brought it up to Ron that night over dinner. "You ever hear of that carving on Trail 7? Logan asked. Ron paused mid-chew. "What carving?" Logan showed him the photo on his phone. Ron looked at it. His face didn't change, but his hand lowered slowly, spoon hovering over his plate. "Yeah," he said. "I've seen it." "You know who did it?" Ron didn't answer right away. He just sipped his beer and stared out the window like he was listening for something. "It shows up every now and then, not always in the same spot." Logan raised an eyebrow. "Someone carving it over and over?" "No," Ron said quietly. "I mean, it shows up where it wasn't before." The room fell silent. Logan waited for him to laugh, to crack a grin, but he didn't. He just stood up, tossed his plate in the sink, and said, "If you see it again, mark the spot. But don't touch it, and don't follow it." Logan didn't sleep much that night. The wind pressed against the cabin walls, whispering between the cracks in the window frame. Somewhere far off in the woods, an owl called out, long and low, like it was mourning something. At 3:13 a.m., he woke to a scratching noise. Soft, repetitive, like something dragging across wood. He sat up, heart thudding, and listened. Silence. He grabbed his flashlight, moved slowly to the front door, and opened it. The forest was dark and still. Moonlight filtered through the trees, painting long shadows over the clearing. He stepped outside, just to be sure. That's when he saw it. On the tree directly across from the cabin, freshly carved, still flaking wood shavings, was the word again. Croton. And this time, it hadn't been there yesterday. Logan stood frozen on the cabin steps, his bare feet numb against the cold wood. His breath misted in front of him, even though the night wasn't that cold. The forest, somehow, felt colder than the air, like it held its own temperature. A different one. He walked slowly across the clearing, his flashlight cutting a beam through the darkness. The bark around the new carving was raw, the cuts still bleeding sap. The word was exactly the same. Croton. Same size. Same tilt to the R. Same deep gouges at the ends of each letter. It hadn't been made in a rush. Whoever, or whatever, had done this had taken time, even though it had to have happened in the last few hours. Logan swallowed and looked around the trees. "Hello," he called out, his voice cracking slightly. No answer. He stayed out there for nearly 10 minutes, sweeping the trees with his light, heart pounding harder with each passing second. But there was nothing. No footprints, no broken branches. Just silence and the word carved deeper than it should have been. Back inside, he locked the door, turned on every light, and sat with his back to the wall. He didn't sleep the rest of the night, not even a blink. The next day, he walked the tree line again, checking every trunk within 200 feet of the cabin. No other markings. Just that one tree. The same tree that hadn't had a single scratch on it the morning before. He ran his fingers along the letters again and shivered at how fresh they felt. When Ron came back around mid-morning, Logan was waiting for him. "I didn't touch it," he said right away. "But it's back." Ron didn't ask what. He just nodded. "Where?" Logan pointed. Same word. On the tree facing the cabin. Ron walked over, stared at the carving for a long time, then stepped back and looked at the treetops. "It's starting again," he muttered. "What is?" Logan asked. Ron didn't answer, at least not right away. He ran a hand down his face, then motioned for Logan to follow him inside. They sat down at the small kitchen table. Ron opened the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet in the corner and pulled out a worn manila folder. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Each one showed the same word carved into different trees, some on mossy bark, some dry and cracked, others blackened by time. Some looked like they were from the 70s or 80s, yellowed with age. "They all say it?" Logan asked, thumbing through them. "Every damn one," Ron said. "Different trees, different years. Same word, same style. No one's ever caught anyone doing it. Sometimes there are trail cams nearby. You know what they catch." Logan shook his head. "Nothing. Just a flicker of static." Then the next morning, it's there. He pulled another photo from the back of the folder. It was of a man, maybe mid-30s, wearing a Pine Haven Ranger jacket like Logan's. His name tag read J. Keller. "He was me, 30 years ago," Ron said. He saw the carvings too. Obsessed over them. Started following them. Because that's the thing. Eventually you see more. A new one. Then another. Like someone's leaving a trail. Logan looked at him. "What happened to him?" "Went missing," Ron said flatly. 3 weeks after this photo was taken. His boots were found by the river, 2 miles off trail. No body. No note. No sign he even got there. Ron stood up and poured a fresh cup of coffee, his hands shaking just enough to notice. "They say it's just a word," he muttered. "But I don't buy that. That word, it pulls at something. And once you start noticing it, it starts noticing you back." That night, Logan sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the darkness beyond the cabin windows. Every creak in the walls felt louder. Every rustle in the trees snapped his eyes toward the glass. Around midnight, he heard it again. Scratching. This time, it was louder. It wasn't coming from a tree. It was from under the cabin. He grabbed his flashlight and his boots and moved slowly across the creaky floor. The beam of light jittered slightly in his hand as he crouched down by the back window and lifted the edge of the rug. There was a hatch there. He hadn't even noticed it before. Most cabins in Pine Haven had a small crawl space beneath. Nothing fancy, just enough to check plumbing or wiring. But this hatch had a rusted latch, nailed shut with a crooked piece of wood across it. And that scratching? It was still going. Something was down there. He backed away, and reached for his radio. "Ron," he whispered. "You there?" Static. He turned the volume up. "Ron, are you hearing me? There's something under the cabin." The scratching stopped. Then, from the radio, a different voice came through. But it wasn't Ron. It was a child. A girl's voice. Faint, whispery, right against the mic. "Don't follow it." Then silence. Logan stared at the radio like it might bite him. His hands were trembling now. He stood up, heart hammering in his ears, and grabbed his keys. He wasn't going to sleep here another night. But when he opened the front door, he froze. Across the clearing, 5 trees in a perfect arc now had the same word carved into them. Croton. They hadn't been there at sunset. And in the distance, down the trail beyond the last tree, something moved. Not quickly, not with urgency, just waiting. Logan didn't sleep. He didn't even sit. The shotgun above the fireplace hadn't been used in years, but by 1 a.m., it was in his hands, the dust still clinging to the barrel. He hadn't hunted since he was a teenager, but that didn't matter now. He just needed something, anything, to feel like he had control. But the truth was, the control was gone. The carvings in the trees weren't just strange anymore. They were organized, deliberate. Someone, or something, was trying to say something. And whatever it was, it had gotten a whole lot closer. He stayed up until dawn, watching the tree line through the cabin windows. The 5 trees, each carved with CRO10, stood like silent sentries, staring him down. The wind didn't move their branches. No birds came near them. It was like the forest itself was holding its breath. The moment the sky turned gray, Logan threw on his jacket and stepped outside, shotgun in hand. He walked right up to the first tree, ran his fingers over the carving, then turned toward the trail. He wasn't going to wait anymore. He followed the trail past the 5th tree, deeper into the woods than he'd gone before. The air grew colder, heavier, the kind of cold that sank into your teeth. He passed broken branches and crushed undergrowth, signs that something big had moved through here, but the trail was wrong. It didn't win naturally. It zigzagged like it was trying to confuse anyone who followed. About a mile in, he found the first pile. It was small, almost like a cairn, stones stacked on top of each other in a tight little pyramid, maybe 2 feet tall. And just like the trees, the top rock had the same word carved into it. He crouched and touched the stone. It was warm, too warm. He jerked his hand back and looked around, scanning the woods. There was nothing visible, no sound, not even wind. And then he saw it. Just for a second, maybe less, something pale behind the trees. Tall, thin and wrong, like a person stretched out too far. It moved the second he looked at it. No footsteps, no rustle, just gone. Logan backed away from the stone pile and started back toward the cabin, but the trail was missing. The forest had shifted. The trees around him weren't familiar. The underbrush was thicker, the slope of the land different. There were no markers, no signs. But worst of all, no sound. Not even the birds. He wasn't alone anymore. He turned in a slow circle, trying to retrace his steps, when a sharp whisper slid through the air like wind in a tunnel. "Don't follow it." The same voice from the radio. A girl's voice. Logan spun toward it, heart thudding in his chest. "Hello," he shouted. "Where are you?" No answer. Just a low rustling, like something dragging through leaves. Then, a giggle. High-pitched. Close. He raised the shotgun. "Show yourself." The forest answered with silence. He stood still for minutes, waiting, breathing hard, sweat running cold down his back despite the temperature. Finally, he chose a direction, downhill, and started moving fast. Branches slapped at his arms, thorns tore at his jeans. He didn't care. After what felt like forever, he burst into a clearing. There was something in the middle, a structure. It looked like an old ranger station. Same shape, same tin roof, but the wood was weathered gray and nearly rotting. It hadn't been used in years. The windows were black. The door hung open slightly. He didn't want to go inside, but something told him he had to. He stepped into the doorway slowly, shotgun at the ready. The smell hit him first. Damp, earthy, like mushrooms and mold. Then came the sound, dripping water somewhere in the dark. The interior was covered in old papers, torn maps, rusted filing cabinets. And on the far wall, etched into the wood in deep, uneven strokes, Crotone, 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 over and over, 50 times, 100. In the center of the room, a chair sat facing the back wall. On it, a ranger's uniform was draped neatly, a name tag still attached, J. Keller. And beside the chair, something small and white, a bone. Human, maybe. Too smooth to be anything else. Logan backed out of the cabin slowly, breathing hard, heart pounding like a war drum in his ears. As he turned around to leave, a new sound stopped him cold. Footsteps, crunching, slow, deliberate, from just beyond the tree line. He didn't wait to see what it was. He ran. He didn't stop until he saw the outline of his cabin through the trees. He slammed the door shut, locked it, and backed away, trying to catch his breath. And then the radio crackled again. This time, it wasn't static. It was breathing. Heavy. Close. Then came the voice, low and male this time. You saw it. Logan dropped the radio. Outside, something scratched at the cabin walls. Not with nails. With something sharper. Logan didn't sleep that night either. He sat in the armchair by the window, shotgun resting across his lap, eyes locked on the tree line. Every few minutes, he thought he heard something. A whisper, a scrape, a breath that wasn't his. But when he leaned closer, there was only silence. The scratches on the outside wall were real. He checked them at first light. Deep, straight, like someone or something had dragged a knife along the siding. 3 lines, low to the ground. Too low for a person, but too clean for an animal. The radio didn't speak again that day. Just silence and the occasional burst of static. But the carvings had spread. Logan walked the perimeter of the property with heavy boots and heavier dread. What had been 5 marked trees were now 11. Some he could see from the back porch. Others farther off, deeper into the forest. And every one of them bore the same word. Crotone. Same jagged, uneven letters. Like they'd been cut into the wood in a rush. Angry. Or scared. By the 3rd tree, he stopped. This one had something new. A small bundle hanging from a low branch. It was wrapped in old, yellowed cloth and tied with frayed red string. Logan reached up and untied it with shaking hands. Unsure why he was doing it at all. Just that he had to know. Inside were 3 things. A button. Old, worn smooth, like from a ranger's jacket. A scrap of paper, stained and almost too fragile to hold. And a tooth. Human. No doubt about it. Logan unfolded the paper. The writing was smeared, but a few words stood out. Don't trust the reflections. It wears your voice. He dropped the bundle and stumbled back, eyes darting toward the trees. He didn't know what any of it meant, but it was getting closer. He could feel it. That afternoon, the sky grew dark fast. No clouds, just an eerie dimming, like a storm was coming but never arrived. Birds vanished. Wind stopped. It felt like standing inside a vacuum. Then, just after sunset, the voice came back. This time, it wasn't from the radio. It came from just outside the front door. Logan. His name. Spoken softly, calmly, like an old friend. Come out. I want to talk. He raised the shotgun and held his breath. Logan. A pause. Then again, slower. Come out. The voice sounded like his late father. Same gravelly tone. Same slow way of talking. But his father had died in 2012. Buried 2 towns over. I'm not falling for it, Logan whispered. Then the knock came. 3 slow knocks. Soft. Knuckles on wood. He crept toward the peephole, but stopped halfway. He realized he could see something moving in the window glass to his left. A shape. A face. But when he turned his head to look directly at it, there was nothing there. Back to the glass. Yes, there it was. A tall figure. Thin. White face. Too pale. No eyes, just black holes where they should have been. And it was smiling. Not wide, not crazed, just calmly grinning. Like it knew something. He backed away, grabbed a sheet, and covered the window. The knock came again, louder this time. Then a voice, his own voice, from behind the door. "Let me in." He froze. "Let me in, Logan." He stood there, breathing shallow, staring at the locked doorknob. Sweat beaded at his hairline. Something was mimicking him. Something was learning. He didn't move, didn't breathe. After a long silence, the voice whispered one last thing. "I'm already inside." Logan didn't remember falling asleep. But when he opened his eyes, the house was quiet. Gray light filtered through the covered windows, casting a muted glow across the cabin. He was still in the chair, shotgun on his lap, shoulders sore from staying tense so long. He looked around slowly. Everything seemed untouched. No broken locks. No smashed windows. No blood. Just stillness. But something was wrong. The silence wasn't natural. The kind of silence that makes your ears strain, begging for a sound. Any sound, just to confirm you're still part of the world. There was no wind. No birds. Not even the groaning creaks of the old wooden walls. Only the distant ticking of the wall clock and the sound of his own heartbeat. He stood, walked to the window, and lifted a corner of the sheet. Outside, the forest looked the same, but different. The trees seemed a little closer. He blinked and looked again. They were where they always had been, weren't they? He shook off the feeling and went to check the door. Still locked. No marks on the wood. But when he opened it just a crack, he noticed something on the doormat. It was a Polaroid photo, the kind people stopped using decades ago. He picked it up carefully. It was him, sleeping, in the armchair. Last night, he dropped it like it burned him. There was no one else out there. No one who could have taken that. Unless the thing that knocked had been inside after all. Logan backed up, heart racing, trying to remember every second of the night. Had he dozed off? For how long? Could something have come in, taken a picture, and left? And what if it never left? He grabbed his flashlight and walked the house slowly, checking every room. Under the bed, inside the closets, the crawl space in the hallway, the attic hatch above the pantry. Nothing. But just as he was about to shut the bedroom door, something caught his eye. In the mirror, there was someone standing behind him. He spun around, shotgun raised. Nobody. But the mirror still showed a faint silhouette, just for a second. Tall, narrow, almost human, but not quite. He covered the mirror with a towel and stepped back, breath hitching. This wasn't just some animal in the woods. It was inside. It had been watching him sleep, studying him. Logan decided he wasn't staying another night. No job was worth this. He started packing his things, just the essentials. No time to think about everything he'd have to leave behind. As he shoved his flashlight and journal into his pack, the radio crackled. Not just static this time. Words. A whisper, "Don't go." He froze. The voice was layered. Not one, not two, but dozens. Like a choir of whispers in perfect unison. Male, female, young, old. All saying the same thing. "Don't go." He ripped the cord from the wall. The radio kept talking. "Don't go." He slammed the back panel off and tore out the batteries. "Don't." Silence. He stood in the middle of the room, chest heaving, hands shaking. Then a new sound rose from outside. Not voices, not whispers. Drums. Low, rhythmic, faint at first, but growing louder. Like someone beating on old skin drums deep in the forest. Boom, boom, boom. And then, chanting. Not English. Not any language Logan had ever heard. Something older. Throat sung, primal, with long vowels and harsh breaks. He stepped onto the porch with his shotgun, looking into the darkening woods. Lights. Dozens of them. Small flickers, like lanterns or torches, weaving between the trees in a slow procession. Figures moved with them. Tall. Thin. Some walking upright, others crawling. None of them walked like people. Their movements were off, jerky, twitching at the joints. And in the clearing just 50 yards from his cabin, one of them stopped. It stood perfectly still, then raised its arm and pointed at him. No face, just blank skin stretched tight across the head, like wax left too close to heat. Logan stepped back into the house and locked the door. But in that moment, he knew the truth. He was never going to make it out on his own. In this place, it wasn't just haunted. It was claimed. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ron's face, blood-soaked, lifeless, slumped beneath the great oak like a broken doll. I heard his voice echoing in my head. The oak, it's the heart of it. Over and over. When morning finally came, gray and cold, it felt like the sun had given up too. I couldn't stop shaking. Not from the chill, but from the memory. The way Mara's face had twisted, her eyes like bottomless pits, her skin like wax. And those things that came out of the trees. I'd never seen anything like them. Never imagined anything could move like that. Jerky, fast, too many joints in the wrong places. And the way they tore through us, like we were nothing. I was lucky. No, that wasn't the right word. I'd been spared, and I still didn't know why. I sat outside the ranger station that morning, huddled in a blanket that did nothing to warm me, staring at the tree line, half expecting to see those pale figures standing there, watching. But the forest was still again. Silent. Like it always was after the worst of it. Like it had fed well, and was full. People came. Authorities. Questions. Clipboards. Flashing lights and murmured conversations. They found the clearing, or what was left of it. I don't know what they told the press. Probably some version of the usual. Wild animal attack, freak weather, people lost and panicked. But the bodies were real. The blood was real. Ron was real. They tried to make me talk. I gave them a version they could handle. A cleaned-up lie. But even as I spoke, I knew none of it would stick. Because deep down, I could feel it. This wasn't over. Not even close. A week passed. Then two. I didn't go back into the forest. Not even to the edge. I stayed in the ranger station, packing boxes, filling out the paperwork they shoved in front of me. I didn't care. I was going to leave. Go back to my parents' place in Colorado, maybe. Disappear into the world and pretend none of this ever happened. But then the dream started. Every night. The forest. The whispers. That word, crotone, carved into bark, flickering in firelight, etched into stone, burned into skin. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, gasping like I'd been drowning. Sometimes I'd find myself standing at the edge of the woods without remembering how I got there. And then one night, I saw him. Curtis Beale. He was standing at the tree line, half in shadow, half in moonlight. His ranger uniform was torn and dirty, his skin pale like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. But it was his eyes that froze me. Empty, hollow, exactly like Mara's. He didn't move, just stared. And then he raised one finger, slowly, and pointed at me. I stumbled back inside and bolted the door. After that, I knew. The forest hadn't finished with me. It had marked me, just like Mara, just like Curtis, just like all the others. It had let me go, but only for now. It wanted something from me. I didn't know what yet, but I could feel it pulling me back, whispering my name on the wind, calling me in my dreams. I thought about leaving, really leaving, driving until the trees were a memory and the sky felt wide again. But I couldn't, because if I left, someone else would take my place. Some other kid looking for a paycheck or a purpose. Some weekend hiker who didn't know any better. And they'd be swallowed, just like the rest. No warning, no way out. So I stayed. I started researching, digging through old files, newspaper clippings, local legends. Everything about disappearances in the area. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. There were so many. And always that word, showing up in journals, on carvings, in whispers from the old folks who lived nearby, but never dared go into the woods after sundown. Crotone. I traced it back as far as I could. Past the missing hikers, past the old ranger stories, past even the native legends. It was older than all of that. Not just a word. A name. A warning. Maybe a god. I didn't know what it wanted. But I was going to find out. Because I wasn't running anymore. I started keeping a journal. Not the kind where you write your feelings or jot down a grocery list. This was different. Every entry was survival. Every note a breadcrumb in case I forgot who I was, or in case something took over and left a shell in my place. I taped a recorder under my bed. I lined my windows with rock salt. And every night, before I tried to sleep, I whispered the same phrase to myself. You are still you. You are still here. But I don't think it was true anymore. The dreams weren't just dreams. They were instructions. I started waking up with mud on my boots, scratches on my forearms, pine needles in my sheets. My flashlight would be missing, then reappear 3 days later, batteries drained and covered in something sticky and black. Once, I found my ranger logbook sitting open on the kitchen table, every page filled in with writing I didn't recognize. Sloppy, looping letters that weren't quite English. I tried to burn it, but it wouldn't catch. Just curled at the edges and hissed like wet wood. I buried it in the trash out back. The next morning, it was on my pillow. I stopped asking questions after that. Instead, I started watching the trees. From my porch, through the binoculars. Always the same spot, that great oak. Nothing moved. Not even a bird. No wind. Just stillness. But I swear it was closer. Like each day it leaned a little more forward, inch by inch, reaching. Then, about 3 weeks after the last sighting of Curtis Beale, the power went out. Whole station dark. I lit candles, checked the breaker, nothing. Then I heard it. 3 knocks. Not at the front door. Not at the window. But under the floorboards. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The knocks came again. Slower this time. Hollow. Like someone was knocking from inside the crawl space beneath the station. I wanted to run. But where? Outside into the forest? Into their arms? Instead, I grabbed the fire axe from the supply closet and stood in the center of the room, staring at the floor. I whispered Ron's name like a prayer, or maybe an apology. The knocking stopped. Then came the scratching. Long, dry, deliberate. A nail, maybe a bone, dragging against wood from below. I stood frozen for what felt like hours. Then silence. And then, I kid you not, I heard my own voice whisper from the floorboards. Come down. It's time. I didn't sleep that night either. At dawn, I packed a bag. Not to run, but to go deeper. Whatever had marked me wasn't going to stop. It was in me now. Maybe it had always been. I needed to see the oak again. Not just from the safety of a porch with binoculars. I needed to stand beneath it. To know the truth of what Ron saw. Of what Curtis became. Of what Mara served. I left a note on the ranger station desk. Just one sentence. If I don't come back, burn the forest. Then I walked into the trees. No trail. No compass. Just the pull. Like a hook behind my heart. And the forest welcomed me. The deeper I walked, the more the world shifted. It started with the trees, how they leaned in just slightly, forming a corridor above me that blocked out the sky. The birdsong vanished. Even the wind held its breath. The path I took didn't exist on any map, and yet I never once doubted my direction. Something was guiding me, not through landmarks or logic, but through sensation. A low, steady pull in my chest, like gravity had changed its rules just for me. I walked until I couldn't hear my own footsteps. And then I saw it again. The oak. That same ancient, towering thing that Ron had marked. But it was different now. Bigger. Alive in a way no tree should be. Its bark shimmered faintly, as if it were covered in a thin membrane. At its base lay a ring of small bones. Animals, maybe. Or not. Some were too long, too narrow. Arranged carefully in a perfect circle. I stepped closer and the ground pulsed. Like something just beneath the surface had exhaled. My ears rang. I took another step and whispers. Hundreds of them. Too low to make out the words. Like insects speaking a language I was never meant to understand. They crawled into my ears, into my skull. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, and screamed, but no sound came out. Just a gasp. My vision blurred. My heart slammed like a drumbeat echoing from the forest itself. And then it stopped. I looked up, and she was there. Mara, but not as I remembered her. Not the woman I'd once laughed with over morning coffee. Her body was thin now, sunken, as if it had been hollowed out and filled with something darker. Her eyes were pitch black, no white at all, and her skin shimmered the same way as the oak's bark. "Darren," she said, her voice layered, like it wasn't just hers. "You came." I couldn't speak. My lips moved, but no sound came. She tilted her head like a curious animal, then reached out and touched my chest with 2 fingers. "I told you the forest chooses." The moment she touched me, 1,000 images crashed into my mind. Ron kneeling at this very tree, whispering in some forgotten tongue. Curtis screaming into the night, his arms stretching into something inhuman. Mara standing in a circle of bones, lifting a deer skull above her head, and then me, standing among them. Changed. Watching. Waiting. She stepped back. "You understand now," she said. And I did. That's the worst part. The forest wasn't cursed. It wasn't haunted. It was hungry. It fed on memory, on fear, on people. And Mara hadn't been taken. She'd been transformed. Initiated. Accepted. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was an invitation. The oak behind her opened. I don't know how else to say that. The trunk split vertically, silently, revealing a dark passageway that led nowhere. Or maybe everywhere. I saw stars through it. Roots. Eyes. A river that ran upward. My brain couldn't hold it. Mara turned and walked into it. And I followed. The world inside the tree didn't follow any rule I knew. It was like stepping into a space that had no shape. There were no walls, no ceiling, no floor, just layers. Layers of sound, of scent, of movement that passed through me like smoke. I wasn't walking anymore. I was floating, or falling, or maybe both. Time didn't feel right in there. It stretched and curled like a film that had melted under a projector lamp. And Mara, she was ahead of me, gliding without moving her feet. Her head never turned, but I could feel her watching me, inside me. Every time I blinked, I saw her face from a different memory, smiling at me from across a diner booth, crying in our old apartment during a thunderstorm, standing naked in moonlight the night before she vanished. Now, that same face looked back at me with pity. "You should have stayed away," she said. "But the forest knew you would come. It remembers everything." "What is this place?" I asked, though the words came out muffled, as if underwater. She didn't answer. Instead, the tunnel around us began to shift. Roots curled and pulled apart like the inside of a living lung. Ahead, a shape formed, tall, humanoid, but not quite right. Its limbs were too long, its head cocked at an unnatural angle. No face, just bark, moss, and eyes. So many eyes. I stopped walking. My legs refused to move. "You don't belong here," the thing said, not with a voice, but by pushing the thought directly into my skull. "But you're close." My mouth opened. "I'm not one of you. You are now." The walls pulsed again, and suddenly I was surrounded. Figures began to emerge from the roots. Some were barely more than silhouettes. Others were painfully familiar. Ron, Curtis, even people I didn't recognize but felt I'd seen in dreams. All of them had the same black eyes. All of them wore expressions of calm acceptance. Like this nightmare had become home. They began to whisper in unison. "Let go. Let go. Let go." I backed up, trembling. No, this isn't real." Mara stepped toward me. "You followed me," she said softly. "You crossed the line. You passed the tree. You said its name. You offered your memory." "What memory?" She smiled, but it was hollow. "Me." Suddenly it hit me like a punch to the chest. The day we first met. Her laugh. Her scent. The way she chewed her pencil when she was thinking. It was gone. All of it. I reached for the image and found only fog. "No," I whispered. "You traded it the moment you walked in." The figures were closer now, circling me. The forest only takes what you love most and gives you back what it chooses. Then, without warning, the tunnel collapsed. I fell. No, I was flung into a blinding white void, screaming, clawing at nothing. And then, silence. I woke up face down in the dirt. The air was damp, cold. The scent of pine and something older, Something sour filled my nose. For a moment, I couldn't move. My body felt heavier than it should have, like I'd been underground for years. When I finally rolled onto my back, the canopy above was glowing with early morning light. Birds chirped softly in the distance. It was overcast. Gentle fog rolled through the trees. I was lying just outside the tree, the same tree Mara had vanished into. But it looked different now. The bark was smooth. No carving. No hollow. Just an old, silent trunk with nothing special about it at all. I sat up, dizzy. My phone was gone. My flashlight. My knife. But in my shirt pocket was her locket. I opened it. Inside, there was a photo of me. Just me. I stared at it, confused. I swore the last time I saw it, the picture had been of the two of us. Then I realized I couldn't picture her face anymore. I tried. God, I tried. I remembered the name, Mara, and I remembered that she had been important to me. But her voice, her laugh, the exact shape of her eyes, it was like someone had taken an eraser to that part of my brain and wiped it clean. I stumbled to my feet, heart pounding. The truck was gone. The trail markers too. I walked in circles, yelling for help. Hours passed, maybe days. Eventually, I found a road. A ranger spotted me walking barefoot, covered in scratches, talking to myself. They took me to a hospital in a nearby town. Said I'd been missing for nearly a week. They didn't believe anything I said about the tree or the forest. They thought I'd had a breakdown. Trauma-induced memory loss, they called it. A grief fugue. They said I was lucky to be alive. I wasn't so sure. I moved back to the city. I got rid of my camping gear. Changed my number. Tried to forget. But the dreams won't stop. Every night, I wake up at the same time, 3:17 a.m., to the sound of whispering. I don't know what it's saying, but I know it's the same voice that spoke inside the tree. Sometimes, I see things in reflections. Shapes standing behind me, just outside the light. And every now and then, I find a pine needle in my bed, or a faint carving on the wall that fades before I can photograph it. One morning, I woke up and the locket was gone. In its place was a slip of paper, folded neatly beside my pillow. On it were 4 words. You remembered too much. So I moved again, but I don't think it matters anymore. The forest remembers, and now so do I. It was a crisp October morning in northern Michigan, the kind that makes your breath hang in the air and the forest seem more alive than usual. Birch Hollow stretched out in all directions, miles of dense woods where the trees seemed to lean in a little too close, as if eavesdropping. Ethan Sawyer had been with the Ranger Service for nearly 9 years. He knew these woods like the back of his hand. Every trail, every bluff, every grove. But when the call came in, a child missing during a hunting trip, it was like the entire forest suddenly became unfamiliar. The boy's name was Nathan Bell, 9 years old, out with his father for the first time since deer season opened. According to the dad, they had been tracking a trail early that morning when Nathan wandered a few feet ahead and just disappeared. No screams, no struggle, not even footprints beyond a certain point. It didn't make sense. The soil was soft from the rain 2 nights ago. Ethan saw the trail himself. Nathan's boot prints led forward and then simply stopped. Not veered, not dragged, just ended. A dozen volunteers, dogs, a chopper, none of it made a difference. By nightfall, the father was a broken man, trembling near the ranger station fire, repeating over and over, "He was just ahead of me. He was right there." Ethan stayed late that night, reviewing the maps, sipping bitter coffee, hoping for a break. The wind howled outside, and that's when he heard it. A whisper, soft, gentle, almost playful. "Ethan." He froze. The room was empty. The only sound should have been the space heater humming near his feet. But the voice came again, almost behind his ear this time. "Help him." Ethan stood, his heart thudding. He checked the windows. Locked. The door, too. He even stepped outside into the biting cold, but the woods around him were still. Not a branch stirred. He told himself it was the stress. Lack of sleep. Maybe something caught in the air vents. But as he climbed into his truck that night, ready to head home, he saw something out the corner of his eye, at the edge of the trees. A boy, small, wearing a dark hoodie, standing still between the birch trunks. Ethan jumped out, called to him, "Hey, Nathan," but the figure vanished, slipping between the trees with no sound at all, not even the rustle of leaves. He didn't sleep that night. By morning, he made up his mind. The official search had covered the obvious routes, but there were parts of Birch Hollow most folks didn't go. Old game trails, strange deer circles, and one section of woods the locals whispered about, but never marked on maps. They called it the Grove. Ethan had never gone in that deep before, but after what he heard and saw, he couldn't shake the feeling. The forest had taken Nathan, and it was waiting for him too. The next morning, Ethan returned to Birch Hollow alone. He didn't tell the others. No backup, no search dogs, just him, his backpack, a flashlight, his old field journal, and a gut feeling that the others were looking in the wrong place. The further he walked into the forest, the quieter it became. No birdsong, no wind, just the crunch of his boots against the frost-covered ground and the sound of his own breathing. Birch trees lined the path, their white bark peeling in long strips like old wallpaper. He passed the last marker, an old orange tape tied to a branch, and kept going, into the places the maps didn't show. He thought of the boy's face. Nathan Bell, 9 years old, blue jacket, red shoelaces. Missing for 2 days now. That was when he heard it again. The whisper, fainter this time, further away. Ethan. He froze mid-step, looked around. Nothing. The wind had completely died. It didn't feel like silence. It felt like listening. He continued, slower now, ears tuned to every faint sound. This way, it wasn't like a normal voice. It didn't echo. It didn't sound like it came through air. It was as if the voice grew from the trees themselves, out of the bark, the leaves, the roots beneath his feet. He swallowed hard and followed. The forest began to change the deeper he went. The birch trees grew tighter together, their branches curling inward like fingers clasping overhead. The trunks were too close, too twisted, forming narrow passages that forced him to turn sideways in some spots. Light barely made it through, but the whispers grew louder. "Come closer. He's waiting. Almost here." He scribbled into his field journal with a shaky hand. Whispering at 2:14 p.m. Can't tell direction. Feels like it's inside my skull. Not wind. Not imagination. Then he saw something that made his heart spike. Scratches in the bark. Not claw marks. Not initials. But symbols. Repeated over and over on different trees. Thin lines bent in loops. Circles with slashes. Some reminded him of eyes, some of mouths. They were too precise, too deliberate. He traced one with his glove. The bark was rough beneath, but warm. Strangely warm. When he stepped forward, the air shifted. Everything dimmed, like a cloud had passed over the sun, but the sky was clear when he looked up. Still, the shadows felt heavier. He could see his breath now even though the temperature hadn't dropped. Then, movement. A flicker between two trees, maybe 50 feet ahead. He raised his flashlight, clicked it on, and there, for a split second, he saw a figure, small, childlike, standing dead still, facing him. "Nathan." The figure didn't move. He called again. "Nathan, is that you?" Still nothing. Ethan stepped forward, heart pounding, light shaking in his hand. Another whisper came, but this one was not like the others. It sounded wrong, glitchy, like a broken cassette tape playing backward. He SSS way, eyeing too long. He ran, toward the figure, toward where he thought he saw the boy. But when he got there was nothing. Just leaves, branches, and more symbols scratched deep into the bark, so fresh that bits of wood still curled at their edges. He sank to one knee, breathing hard, listening. The forest wasn't silent anymore. It was whispering, every direction. A dozen voices, then dozens more, like a crowd just beyond his reach, murmuring secrets he almost understood, but not quite. He backed up slowly, the flashlight beams sweeping trees that all looked the same now. No trail markers. No clear direction. He realized something terrifying. He didn't know how to get back. And the whispers were still calling. Ethan, he's waiting in the grove. Don't leave now. He looked up. There, hanging on a crooked branch ahead, was something that didn't belong. A red shoelace, tied in a perfect bow. Ethan stared at the red shoelace for a long time, not moving. It was just hanging there, gently swaying even though the air was completely still. He stepped forward slowly, reached out, and touched it. It was damp. He looked around again, trying to make sense of the surroundings. The trees were different here. Not just thicker, older. Their trunks gnarled into each other like twisted ropes, bark bulging like tumors. Moss grew in strange streaks, not random, but forming rough shapes, lines, arcs, spirals, as if the forest itself was trying to write something. Or speak. The trail was gone. No footprints. No broken branches. No clear direction. Just Ethan and the red shoelace, and the whispers that hadn't stopped since he crossed the last ridge. He looked down at his boots. The ground beneath him was soft, too soft. Spongy, like wet carpet. Every step gave a slight squish now. That smell was getting stronger too. Not rot exactly, more like damp iron and burnt leaves. It clung to the inside of his nose. He pressed on. At some point, he stopped checking his compass. It spun wildly anyway, the needle jittering and refusing to settle. The GPS tracker on his belt blinked red, no signal. So he walked by feel, past a hollow tree split clean down the middle, oozing dark sap like blood from a wound. Past a patch of ferns that grew in a perfect spiral pattern. Past 3 small stones arranged in a triangle, like someone or something had placed them there deliberately. That's when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the whispers. It was breathing. Not his. Low. Wet. Shaky. Ethan froze, one boot midair. The sound was close. Behind a thick wall of trees off to his left. He crouched low, moving quietly, using the thick trunks as cover. When he peeked around one, he saw it. Not the boy. Not a person. But something. It stood maybe 5 feet tall, hunched, its arms long and thin like branches stripped of bark. Its head was smooth, almost featureless. No eyes. No mouth. Just skin stretched tight over bone. Its chest expanded with each ragged breath. It wasn't facing him, but it turned slightly, as if it sensed him. Ethan held his breath. The thing took a single, deliberate step toward the center of a clearing. Then another. In the middle of that clearing was something worse. A ring of stones. Flat, gray, covered in moss. And standing inside it was Nathan, the missing boy, his back to Ethan, his arms slack at his sides. Just standing there. Still. Too still. Ethan felt his knees weaken. He wanted to run, scream, something, but he forced himself forward, crouched low, staying behind the creature. It didn't move fast. It kind of drifted, like it floated but touched the ground just enough to leave behind dark, wet indentations where it passed. When Ethan got closer, he saw Nathan's face. The boy's eyes were open, but blank. His lips moved slightly, not speaking, mouthing something, repeating. Repeating what? Ethan leaned closer and heard it. The whispers. But they were coming from Nathan, as if the boy had become a speaker for the forest. Ethan's chest tightened. He stepped into the ring. Suddenly, silence. The creature stopped moving. Nathan blinked. His lips stopped. For one terrifying second, everything froze. Then the boy slowly turned his head toward Ethan and whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Ethan didn't move. Nathan's whisper still hung in the air, soft as breath, but it felt like it hit him in the chest. The boy stood motionless in the center of the stone circle, his face pale, his eyes not quite blank anymore. There was something behind them now, something watching from inside. "You shouldn't be here," Nathan repeated, quieter this time. Almost like he wasn't talking to Ethan, but echoing something that had been said to him, or through him. The forest pressed in from all sides. It felt tighter now, like the trees themselves were leaning closer, listening. Then Ethan noticed it. They were no longer alone. The creature that had brought him here was gone, vanished without a sound, but others had taken its place. At first, he didn't see them, but as his eyes adjusted, shapes emerged in the shadows between the trees. Dozens of them, tall, thin, and silent. Some leaned against tree trunks, unmoving, like statues. Others stood behind mossy rocks or twisted roots, all of them facing inward, toward the ring of stones. Toward him, they had no eyes, no mouths, just smooth, featureless faces, skin stretched too tight, as if molded from clay. Their bodies were human-shaped, but unnaturally long in the limbs, like the forest had stretched them out to fit its will. And the way they tilted, some just slightly off balance, as if frozen mid-step, made Ethan's stomach twist. He tried to speak, to ask Nathan what was happening, but the second he opened his mouth, they moved. Not toward him. They turned their heads. All at once, every single faceless figure turned its head toward him, slow and jerky, like they hadn't moved in years. And though they had no eyes, Ethan felt them seeing him, felt their attention sink into his skin like cold water. He stepped back, but the ring of stones offered no comfort, no protection. That's when the whispers came back, louder this time. Not from Nathan, not from the trees, from them. Dozens of voices, whispering in sync, words overlapping, reversing, some in English, some in no language at all. They spoke directly into his thoughts. You brought fire. You broke the line. The marked one. His vision blurred. His knees buckled. He dropped to the ground just outside the ring. And still, the figures stood, watching. Then, one stepped forward. Not toward him, but toward Nathan. It crossed into the stone circle, something none of the others did. Its hand, long and thin, lifted and touched Nathan's forehead. The boy gasped, and the moment he did, every single creature vanished. Not ran, not faded, just gone. The trees creaked. The air shifted. Nathan collapsed to his knees, clutching his head. Ethan crawled toward him, heart pounding so loud he barely heard the boy whisper, "They want a name." Ethan froze. "A name?" he asked. Nathan looked up. His eyes were wet. His voice cracked. "They can't stay unless someone gives them a name." Ethan shook his head. "Nathan, what are you talking about?" The boy didn't respond. He just stared at the stones around them and said one word, "Whispers." And from the trees, like wind through dying leaves, came a pleased sigh. Not from Nathan, not from Ethan, but from something deeper, something listening, something that had just been given what it needed. Nathan didn't speak again for a long time. After he whispered that name, whispers, something in the forest settled. The air didn't feel safer, but it did feel still, like the trees were waiting, watching, like they'd gotten what they wanted for now. Ethan knelt beside the boy, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. Nathan flinched at the touch, but didn't pull away. His skin was cold, not like he'd been walking through the woods for hours, cold like he'd been somewhere else, somewhere deeper, somewhere wrong. "Hey," Ethan said softly. "It's okay. I'm gonna get you out of here. Your dad's been looking everywhere." Nathan didn't look up. He just stared down at his hands, cupped together like he was holding something, but they were empty. "They told me not to move," he whispered, barely audible. "Said the stones keep them out. But they lied." Ethan's gut tightened. Who lied? Nathan looked up then. His eyes shimmered with something strange. Not tears, not light, movement. Like there was something behind them, shifting in the dark. The ones without eyes. Ethan looked back at the circle of stones. Whatever protective charm they might have had, if any, was broken the second one of those things stepped inside. And yet, nothing had come after him. He helped Nathan to his feet. The boy moved like a puppet, stiff, unsure of his own limbs. Ethan had to half carry him as they walked, careful to avoid roots that seemed to coil a little too eagerly near their ankles. Birch Hollow was different now. The path out, the same one Ethan had taken, had changed. Trees that were once 5 feet apart now stood shoulder to shoulder, bark merging in unnatural ways. Branches knotted together overhead like a roof, blocking out the sun entirely. They walked in grayness. Ethan marked the trees with a knife as they passed, but when he looked back after a dozen paces, the marks were gone. Not healed. Vanished. Nathan whispered something under his breath. "What was that?" Ethan asked. The boy shook his head quickly. "Nothing. Just, if they hear you thinking about leaving, they try to change your mind." Ethan paused. "They can hear your thoughts?" Nathan nodded slowly. "They get in. They whisper through the trees. They show you things. Not real things. But they feel real." Ethan kept moving, one arm firmly around Nathan's back. Every now and then, he'd hear a crackle in the woods, like something snapping a branch, too light for an animal, too slow for wind. Then came the voices. Not like before. These weren't the layered, alien whispers of the eyeless things. These were familiar. "Ethan," a voice called from behind them. "Is that you? You found him." Ethan froze. It was his sister's voice. Claire. But Claire lived in Texas. She wasn't even in Michigan. Nathan looked up at him, shaking his head. "Don't listen." Another voice, this time his father's, came from the left. "Son, come here. It's not safe out there. Bring the boy." Ethan's hands trembled. "How are they doing this?" Nathan shrugged. "They've had a long time to practice." A cold draft curled through the trees like fingers brushing his neck. He turned. Nothing there. Then ahead, finally, a gap. A thinning of the trees. Sunlight bleeding through the canopy. They ran. Ethan didn't think. He just ran, dragging Nathan behind him, his boots slamming into mud, branches slashing his arms. The forest screamed behind them. Not in words. Just noise, pure and primal, like it was angry the game had ended. Then, they were out. Just like that. The tree line broke, and Ethan stumbled into the small clearing near the hunter's camp. Nathan collapsed onto the grass, coughing, blinking hard like he hadn't seen the sky in years. People were already rushing toward them. Search and rescue teams, park rangers, Nathan's father. But everything felt off. Even with sunlight on his skin, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was still with them, like part of the woods had followed them out. When he turned to look at Nathan, the boy wasn't crying, wasn't smiling. He was whispering again, and his hands, they were still cupped together, still holding nothing. Or maybe, something Ethan couldn't see. The emergency responders took Nathan right away. His father was in tears, grabbing the boy and holding him like he'd never let go again. Ethan stepped back, letting the moment unfold, his body still running on adrenaline, and something colder, something sharper that hadn't left him since the woods. The sun was setting by the time they made it back to the ranger station. Ethan gave his statement. He lied through most of it, said he heard voices and found the kid in a clearing. He didn't mention the things without eyes, or the stone circle, or how the forest had moved while he was inside it. He didn't tell them about the whispers. They wouldn't have believed him anyway. After the debrief, Ethan went straight to the station's bathroom to wash the dirt and blood off his hands. He leaned over the sink, letting the cold water run over his fingers. His reflection stared back at him, pale and shaken, but intact. Then he noticed something on his left palm. A thin, straight cut running diagonally from the base of his thumb to the edge of his wrist. Not deep, but precise, clean. He didn't remember getting it in the woods. He poked at it, expecting pain. Nothing, just a dull pressure, like a scar that had always been there. When he turned off the faucet and looked closer, he saw something even more disturbing. Faint, almost invisible unless you really stared. Tiny, branching lines extending from the cut beneath the skin, like roots. He blinked. They were gone. Or had they been there at all? That night, Ethan tried to sleep. But every time he started drifting off, he'd hear the trees again. Not rustling, whispering. His name, his thoughts. He sat up in bed, drenched in sweat, feeling the weight of something watching from the other side of the walls. From the shadows. From the tree-line just beyond the ranger station. And then, he heard Nathan. The boy was miles away now, at a hospital in town. But Ethan heard his voice. Soft. Careful. They marked you too. He jolted up, flicked on the lights, grabbed his flashlight, and scanned the room. Empty. But when he turned toward the mirror again, his reflection didn't move right away. It was just half a second. But it lagged. Just a little. Just enough to notice. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, the cut was still there. Still clean. Still shallow. And something inside Ethan told him that it wasn't a wound. It was an invitation. Or maybe a claim. Ethan stayed on duty, but something in him had shifted. During the day, things were almost normal. He walked the trails, spoke with campers, filed reports. But even then, the forest felt off. The air didn't move the way it used to. The trees didn't creak or rustle. They just stood, perfectly still, like they were waiting. But at night, it got worse. The first time it happened, Ethan was brushing his teeth, halfway through a late shift at the ranger cabin near Birch Hollow's southern edge. No wind, no wildlife noise, just a hum of silence. Then it came. A whisper. It wasn't loud. It was more like a thought, except it wasn't his. Like something had leaned close, just behind him, and breathed into his ear. It said softly, "You came back." He spun around, foaming toothpaste spilling down his shirt. No one was there. He checked the porch, the woods, even under the bed. Nothing. The next night, he woke up at 2:14 a.m. Cold sweat, heart hammering. Not from a nightmare. From the silence. He sat up and looked out the window facing the forest. And saw it. A shape. At the edge of the tree line. Not moving. Tall, thin. Too tall to be a person. And its head was wrong. Tilted to one side like it was listening, or trying to. He stared at it for almost a minute, frozen. Then blinked. It was gone. Ethan started leaving lights on all night. He stopped sleeping in the dark. But it didn't help. The whispers grew more frequent. They'd come when he showered, when he ate, when he walked the empty paths with a hand on his radio and the other gripping a flashlight. They weren't words, not always. Sometimes they were just feelings, urges. Go deeper. Stay still. Look behind you. One night, Ethan caught himself standing in the doorway of his cabin, shoes untied, jacket open, like he'd been about to walk into the woods in his sleep. And he wasn't alone. He could feel it. Something was in the trees. Watching. Calling. He started having the same dream every night. The boy, Nathan, standing in that stone circle, whispering. But his eyes were gone. Just smooth skin where they used to be. He would reach toward Ethan, mouth moving in silence, before suddenly screaming. Except the scream wasn't loud. It was like the sound got sucked into the trees, and only the echo made it through. Ethan would always wake up right then, hand clenching the scar on his palm, heart beating so hard he felt sick. By the third week, he wasn't sure if he was still dreaming or already trapped in something that didn't follow the rules of waking life anymore. He thought of quitting, packing up, leaving town, but every time he got close, something would stop him. A whisper at the gas station, a tree bending the wrong direction, a voice on the radio crackling out his name, even though no one else was on the line. He knew what it meant. He was still inside Birch Hollow, even when he wasn't, and something in there still wanted him. It had been 26 nights since Ethan brought Nathan out of the forest, and yet, somehow, it felt like he'd never left. Sleep was a coin toss now. Sometimes he'd dream of his cabin melting into trees, other times of whispering mouths with no faces. But most nights, he simply sat, on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, waiting for something he couldn't name but knew was coming. Then it happened. One night, just past 3 a.m., the whispering stopped. All of it. No voices, no rustling, no dream, just a weight in the air. He felt it before he heard the knock. 3 sharp taps, not on his door, on his window. And when Ethan turned to look, the glass was fogged. But not from cold. There was a handprint there. Long fingers. Too long. No palm lines. Just pressure. Like it had pressed its whole body against the window just to get closer. He grabbed his flashlight, yanked open the front door, and scanned the yard. No one. No footprints. But the trees were leaning toward him. Not swaying. Leaning. As if listening. That was the moment Ethan knew he wouldn't make it another night unless he got answers. So just before dawn, he returned to the circle of stones where Nathan had been found. This time, he came alone. No radio. No backup. Just a knife, a lantern, and the scar on his hand. The forest didn't resist him. That was the worst part. It wanted him. The path opened like it remembered him, vines curling away like polite hands. And the deeper he went, the more the air changed, thick like syrup, buzzing with a low hum beneath human hearing. Then the whispering came back. But now it was clearer. Sawyer. Sawyer. You heard us. You brought him out. You carry the mark. He didn't answer. He just kept walking. And then he saw it. In the center of the clearing, beyond the moss-wrapped stones, stood a figure. It wasn't Nathan. It wasn't a man. It was something else. It stood tall, wrapped in bark and shadows, like a humanoid tree rotted from within. Its head was a twisted bundle of branches, and its eyes were just hollows, burning with the faintest green-blue light. Its arms didn't move, but Ethan felt them moving, stretching around his thoughts. He didn't run. He didn't scream. He listened, and the keeper spoke, not with a mouth, not in sound, but straight into Ethan's mind. You broke the silence. You brought the marked one back. The boy should have stayed. You carried him across the edge. Now the grove has seen you. Ethan tried to speak. His mouth wouldn't move. The keeper drifted closer, bark cracking like bones under pressure. You may still leave. Once. But not again. The whispering stays with you, unless you return it. Then, something cold touched Ethan's chest, like a second heartbeat growing beneath his ribs. Return, or become. He collapsed. When he opened his eyes again, it was daylight. The grove was gone. Or maybe it had shifted away. The stone circle was just moss and dirt now. No sign of the keeper. Just a ring of scorched leaves where it had stood. And carved into a tree beside him, as if by claw or fire, were 3 simple words. One way left. Ethan didn't know what it meant yet, but he would, very soon. The decision came at 2:47 a.m. Ethan hadn't planned it, not in the traditional sense. He didn't pack like he was going on a trip. No food, no map, just what felt necessary. A steel lighter, a hunting knife with a bone handle, a cheap spiral notebook, and the lantern he'd taken into the woods the first time. The voices had grown louder every night since the warning. Nathan had stopped speaking again. He just sat in the living room, scribbling strange looping symbols onto napkins, then chewing them until they turned to pulp. His parents tried everything: church visits, psychiatrists, a medium from Flint who refused to come back after a single session. But Ethan already knew what was wrong. He had brought something back, and it wasn't done with him. The forest wanted balance. As he stepped out into the early morning mist, Birch Hollow no longer looked like a place for people. It looked ancient, watchful. The trees weren't just tall. They loomed, branches like gnarled fingers clutching the last bits of night sky. Each step deeper made him feel less like a man, and more like a guest walking into a place where guests weren't meant to return twice. Ethan didn't need to find the path this time. The forest made one for him. The trees parted. The air thickened. The birds held their breath. And ahead, the grove waited. It had changed. The stones were taller now, moss-covered pillars that pulsed with a dim glow beneath their cracks. The clearing had no sun, just shifting light, like the reflection off water, though there was no water in sight. And in the center, where Nathan had once stood, was a hollow, not a hole in the ground, a hole in reality. Blackness curled like smoke where it touched the dirt, and inside that void, Ethan saw flickers, memories that weren't his, faces with no mouths, trees that breathed. Somewhere in the shadows, something shuffled forward. The keeper, no longer shaped like a man. It dragged itself out from the dark, no longer bark and bone, but something ancient and wrong. A shifting figure of roots, fog, and intent. It didn't speak. Not yet. Ethan stepped into the circle, placed his notebook onto the stone. He had written everything down. Every whisper, every image that came to him in the dark, every change in Nathan, every time the wind said his name. If he didn't make it back, maybe someone would read it. Maybe someone would believe it. He looked into the void, and he spoke, his voice raw, stripped of pride. I came back. I brought what doesn't belong. I know I broke something. The keeper's form pulsed. Then the whispers rose again, this time not around him, but inside. You return not for the boy. You return to unmake the mark. Ethan felt something shift beneath his skin. His scar glowed faint red. The pain was immense. His vision blurred. But he didn't scream. He let it in. Let whatever had marked him crawl back to where it came from. And the forest responded. The wind circled. The trees bent away. The void narrowed. And the whispering, for the first time in weeks, began to fade. The keeper moved back. Its shape became still. Then it dissolved, slowly, into roots, bark, mist. The void sealed. The circle grew quiet. And Ethan collapsed. He woke up at the edge of Birch Hollow. Daylight. His hands were burned. His notebook was gone. But the whispering was silent. And Nathan? He spoke again that same morning. He didn't remember the forest. Didn't remember Ethan. But he smiled. And when he was alone, he drew pictures of trees that bent like fingers. Of a man with no face, standing between stones. And Ethan knew. It wasn't over. Not yet. But maybe, for now, the grove had let him go. Just once. Just once. 3 months passed. Birch Hollow returned to normal, or so people thought. Nathan Bell went back to school. He never spoke about the forest, not even when pressed. He was normal, but sometimes teachers caught him staring too long at the trees outside the classroom window. Once, during recess, he wandered to the edge of the woods and stood still for 10 minutes, lips moving silently, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Ethan Sawyer never returned to town. His truck was found parked beside the south trailhead, locked. Keys still in the ignition. No sign of struggle. No note. Just tire tracks leading in and none coming out. A month later, Park Ranger Chris Dalton was clearing debris after a thunderstorm when he stumbled onto something half buried beneath wet pine needles, 20 yards off the main trail. It was a blackened notebook, waterlogged, pages swollen and torn, but the first few still legible. It was Ethan's. Scrawled across the inside cover, in hurried pen, was one line. If you find this, it means I went back. The entries were chaotic. Descriptions of voices, faces in the bark, patterns in the leaves, feelings that weren't his. He wrote about the keeper, described it in detail, though the drawing was smudged beyond recognition. And then, the entry stopped. Except for one final page. It had been torn out, folded, and wedged into the back cover. On it was a message written in sharp, jagged pen. The grove doesn't forget. It just waits. But that wasn't the worst part. The last page, water-stained, barely readable, had a strange oily residue across it, as if something had seeped through the ink. And attached to the page, taped in the corner, was a small, handheld recorder. The kind hikers use for quick notes. Ranger Dalton played it later that night, alone in his office. The recording was short, less than 30 seconds, but what it captured made him drop the player. Not words, not footsteps, whispers, thousands of them, all speaking at once, in overlapping layers. Male, female, childlike, ancient. Some laughed, some wept, some simply said one word, again and again. Return. The recording ended with static, and then silence. Dalton submitted the journal to the regional office, but it never showed up in the official case files. No one from headquarters followed up. No one wanted to admit there was something inside Birch Hollow they didn't understand. So he kept a copy, just in case. Now, years later, hikers still avoid the deeper parts of the forest. Trails are mysteriously rerouted. Campfires won't light near the old grove site. Rangers swear they sometimes hear voices just before dawn. And once, a child got separated from his group near Birch Hollow. When they found him, shivering, eyes wide, he wasn't crying. He was smiling and whispering. I first heard about Allegheny Ridge from a laminated flyer tacked to the back wall of our ranger station's break room. Winter assignment needed, Allegheny Ridge Preserve, immediate transfer. No one touched it for 2 weeks. I wasn't surprised. Allegheny had a reputation. A remote preserve in northern Pennsylvania, buried in evergreens and long, empty trails that few dared patrol after October. The kind of place seasoned rangers whispered about, but never volunteered for. People joked it had its own weather system and that the snow there fell colder than anywhere else in the state. I wasn't in a position to be picky. After a busted shoulder ended my fall deployment in Shenandoah early, I was looking for any post that would take me until spring. So I called the number, filled out the paperwork, and 2 days later, I was driving north through heavy snow, wondering why the roads hadn't been plowed since the Eisenhower era. The last 10 miles were the worst, single-lane, winding roads that disappeared beneath the trees. My truck's GPS blinked out just past a rusted green sign that read, Allegheny Ridge Preserve, EST 1954. Population 0. The ranger station was barely visible under the snowfall. A squat concrete structure with a tilted radio tower and one flickering porch light. It looked more like a Cold War fallout shelter than anything scenic. Inside, it was no better. Dust on every surface, a cracked photograph of a man in uniform from the 70s, and an old filing cabinet humming slightly, like it was trying to stay alive. An older ranger named Briggs met me at the door. Big hands, weathered face, eyes that didn't blink often. "You're the new guy?" he said, squinting like I might vanish mid-sentence. "Sam Whitaker," I offered, shaking the snow off my coat. Briggs didn't return the handshake. "Good luck," he said instead, and walked me to a bunk room with one bed and a rusted heater. Over dinner, I asked him how many rangers were stationed here. "Just you come Monday," he said, spooning gray stew into his mouth. I stopped chewing. "You're leaving?" He nodded. "My last shift's tomorrow morning. I've been here 10 years. That's enough." "You're retiring?" "Transferring," he muttered, "before the forest gets curious." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. That night, the wind outside howled like a train running through broken glass. I tried the TV. Nothing. The landline phone had a dial tone, but wouldn't connect to anything. I laid in bed, fully clothed, boots by the door, flashlight in hand, listening to the wind whistle through the seams of the station. At 2:13 a.m., the heater died. At 2:14 a.m., I heard what sounded like whistling, not the wind. A melody, clear, slow, rising and falling like someone walking past the building while softly blowing through pursed lips. I sat up, heart pounding. It circled the station. Once, twice. Then it stopped. I held my breath. Silence returned. By morning, it was like nothing had happened. The snow outside was undisturbed. Briggs was already packed. He gave me one last look before driving off. "Don't follow the whistles," he said. Then he was gone, and I was alone, the new ranger at Allegheny Ridge. I didn't talk to many locals my first week at Allegheny Ridge. That wasn't entirely by choice. The preserve was over 50 square miles of forest, ridge, and snow-covered trails, and the nearest town, Ashwick, was a good 20 minutes down the hill. It wasn't really a town, more like a stubborn cluster of buildings that refused to die. One diner, one gas station, a church with a leaning steeple, and a general store that sold canned peaches and expired batteries. People noticed me the second I walked into the diner. They always do when you're in uniform. Not the friendly kind of notice, either. The kind where forks pause mid-bite and heads turn just enough to make your skin prickle. The waitress, Betty, maybe in her late 60s with a smoker's voice and eyes like rain-soaked gravel, was the first to say anything. "You're the new one up at the ridge," she said, setting down black coffee without asking. I nodded. "Just started." She didn't smile. "You keep the radio on at night?" she added. A few booths over, an older man in a flannel coat coughed and muttered something under his breath. The woman with him elbowed him, eyes sharp. Everyone went quiet again. I stirred cream into my coffee and glanced out the window. Snow had started falling again, slow and quiet like it always did here. There was a kind of heaviness to it, like it didn't fall from the sky, but from the trees themselves. When I asked Betty what she meant by the radio comment, she just shrugged. "Sound travels strange through those woods," she said. "Might hear things. Just don't let it get too quiet. Folks don't last long up there when it gets too quiet." I thought it was local folklore. Every small town has its ghost stories, especially when they're wrapped in trees and snow. But the way she said it, not dramatic, not spooky, just matter of fact, like telling someone to lock their car doors or take vitamin D in winter. Later that week, I went to the general store to stock up. The guy behind the counter, tall, thin, late 30s, name tag said Kurt, asked if I'd seen any shadows yet. I laughed, thought he was joking. He wasn't. He leaned forward a little, whispering even though we were the only ones in the place. "Sometimes they look like people, sometimes just shapes. Thing is, they don't leave prints. Ever. Not even in fresh snow." I started to ask more, but he raised a hand like I was wasting time. "I know how this sounds. You'll see. They always show themselves to new folks first. Like a test." I walked back to the station with 2 bags of supplies and a pit in my stomach. The sky had turned that dull gray that told you dusk was coming even though it was barely 4 p.m. I was halfway up the trail when I saw it. A figure, maybe 50 yards into the tree line. Standing still. Tall. Too tall. Thin. I stopped walking. Looked again. Gone. I told myself it was just a tree, some crooked pine bent under snow, but something about the shape didn't feel right. Something about how the forest around it felt still, like everything was holding its breath. That night, I left the radio on like Betty said. Classical music. Something calm. But in the static between songs, I thought I heard something else. A faint whistle. That same rising and falling melody from the night Briggs left. Only now it sounded closer. Not circling the station, but standing just outside the back window. Waiting. They told me about the dead zones on my second week. Not the kind you get from bad cell service, but places where nothing electronic works. Radios cut out. GPS freezes. Even the station's emergency beacon had flickered off and on when they tried flying over it last winter. That was the official reason I was assigned to check that quadrant. They wanted a presence there again, someone to map anomalies and monitor activity. The way it was phrased made it sound like I was going to a glitch in a video game, not a place in real life. I started the hike just after sunrise. The air was thick with frost, and the snow had that powdery quality that muffles every step, like walking through cotton. As I got deeper into the forest, my radio began to crackle. Then nothing, just static. My compass needle spun lazily in circles, not pointing anywhere. I knew the trail from the map. A small path forked off about 3 miles in, leading toward a narrow ravine the rangers nicknamed Cold Hollow. It was a zone that had been off limits for years after a minor avalanche. But when I reached the fork, there was no sign of it on the ground. No break in the trees, no disturbed snow, like the path had sealed itself shut. But the odd thing was, there were footprints. Not mine. They led into the trees. Perfectly spaced, human-shaped, but the snow within each print hadn't melted or filled in, like they had been made just seconds before I got there. But I hadn't seen anyone ahead, hadn't heard a sound. I followed them. I know. Dumb. First rule of backcountry work, don't follow signs you didn't make. But something about them felt intentional, like they were meant for me. The trees here grew closer together than anywhere else in the preserve. Birch trunks white and narrow, clustered like ribs. The farther I went, the darker it got, even though it was only mid-morning. Eventually the footprints just stopped. Not faded or buried. Just stopped. That's when my flashlight died. It was a brand new mag light. Fully charged. Just cut out. The moment it did, I felt the air shift. Like something was circling me. The forest made no sound, but I could swear something moved between the trees. My breath fogged out in tight clouds. I took one cautious step forward, and something snapped beneath my boot. A twig? No, a thin metal wire. I looked down. A small totem. Twine, feathers, and a frozen pine cone, all bundled together with a rusted nail through the center. Then I heard it. A whisper. Low. Close. Sam. Not shouted. Not screamed. Just spoken. Right behind my ear. I turned, heart thundering, and saw nothing. Just the white-barked birch and falling snow. I left the way I came, retracing each step, not caring about protocol anymore. When I emerged back onto the main trail, my radio clicked back on like someone had flipped a switch. A ranger was calling my name, repeating it. I answered, voice shaking. You went dark for almost 2 hours, he said. We were about to send someone in. Thing was, by my watch, I'd only been gone 30 minutes. Back at the station, I checked the gear. Everything was fine. Batteries full. Compass recalibrated. Even the mag light turned back on without issue. But the totem? I hadn't brought it with me. Still, that night, I found it sitting on my bunk. Wet. Like it had been in the snow just minutes ago. The snow had fallen steady for 2 days, thick and heavy, swallowing the trails until everything looked the same. Just endless white draped over gnarled pine and crooked rock. Sam Whitaker tightened the drawstring on his hood and stepped past the edge of the last marked trail. The forest was quiet again. Too quiet. That's when he saw them. Footprints. Not animal tracks. Not boots from any ranger. These were barefoot impressions, human and small, almost like a child's. They trailed out from the thick tree line and wound toward a frozen gully. Each step pressed clearly into the untouched snow. Sam crouched and brushed at one. It hadn't melted, not even slightly. Even with the snowfall, it remained preserved like something sealed in glass. He followed the path, his boots crunching with each step. After about 40 feet, the print stopped. Just stopped. No return prints. No signs of stumbling or being carried. Nothing. They vanished as if whoever made them had been plucked out of the world mid-stride. The air grew heavier. Still no wind. No birds. Not even the creak of trees. Just silence that pressed in like cotton packed into his ears. He raised his radio. This is Whitaker. I'm northeast of Station Echo. Found something weird. Prints in the snow. Human, barefoot. I'm sending coordinates. No response. Not even static. Sam pulled out his GPS. The screen stayed black. No signal. Nothing at all. Then, from the woods behind him, a soft crunch. Not echoing. Not imagined. A real sound. One step in snow. He turned fast. No one there. But the forest had changed. The shadows between the trees looked wrong. Longer. Slower. One pine nearby shimmered with frost, but the snow around its base looked melted, like it had been warmed from the inside out. And the footprints, those perfect little tracks, had started again. New ones, just a few steps ahead of where they'd vanished. And this time, they were facing him. He stepped back, but his foot landed on bare earth. The snow behind him had melted. No, not melted, peeled away. A perfect circle of exposed dirt behind him, as if something large had been standing there just seconds ago. His breath came faster. The air smelled different now, too, like old copper and pine needles left too long in a damp cellar. Then came the whisper, low, close to the ground. A voice he couldn't place. Stay. Sam turned and sprinted back toward the trailhead, heart slamming in his chest. The forest silence cracking in his ears like pressure rising before a storm. He didn't stop until he hit the old ranger's shed 2 miles west, nearly slipping on the steps as he slammed the door behind him and locked it. Outside, the wind picked up at last. And in it, hidden beneath the howl, He thought he heard footsteps crunching slowly across the snow, circling the shed. The following morning, Sam returned to the forest, less out of duty, more because of what was gnawing at the back of his mind. The footprints, the circle of bare earth, the whisper that somehow spoke without a voice. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those prints and the blank space behind them. He set out earlier than usual, long before the sun had burned through the morning fog. Snow had fallen again, light and powdery, but oddly not enough to cover everything. He kept expecting to find the tracks again, but they were gone, like they had never been there at all. By mid-morning, he reached an old-growth section of the forest known as the North Hollow. The trees here were older than the preserve itself, some nearly black with age and frost. It was there that he saw it. A single pine, massive, twisted, with deep gashes along the bark, stood in a shallow dip between two ridges. The other trees seemed to lean away from it. No snow clung to its trunk. As he approached, a sound broke through the stillness. A whistle, not wind, a melody, and it wasn't coming from the sky or the woods. It came from the tree itself. Sam stopped cold. It was the exact tune his father used to whistle when he was a kid, a short, aimless melody Sam hadn't heard in nearly 20 years. No one else knew it. No one should know it. And yet, the tree sang it back to him. He stepped closer, boots sinking a little into soft snow. The whistle stopped. Then it started again, from behind him. He turned. Nothing. But the tune had changed pitch. It was slower now. And then, chillingly, he realized something terrifying. The whistle was mimicking him. Not just the tune, but his exact whistle. The one he'd just subconsciously exhaled through cracked lips moments earlier. It repeated his breath rhythm, his pauses, his breathing. He backed away slowly. Snowflakes began falling again, but as they hit the bark of the tree, they vanished. Evaporated. He pulled out his radio. Station Echo, do you copy? I'm at Sector 4D, just past North Hollow. I don't know what I have. There's a tree here, making sounds. Mimicking. I need. Static. Then, briefly, a voice. Not from the radio. From the tree. I see you. Not spoken. Whistled. Sam dropped the radio. His mind scrambled to make sense of what was happening. Was it something in the tree? A speaker? Some old prank? But no one came out here. Not in this weather. And no one knew that tune but him. Then he noticed the snow beneath the tree's twisted roots was cracked open. A narrow vent, maybe an old animal den. From inside, something clicked, like knuckles cracking. Then the whistle resumed, soft, curious, and impossibly human. He left, fast. But as he hiked back through the trees, the wind began carrying the tune behind him. It followed him for miles. Never louder than a breeze. Never closer than just beyond the next bend, but always there. A mimic, a lure, or something worse. That night, he locked the ranger cabin door and left the radio off. No whistling, no lights, just silence. But just before sleep took him, the melody returned, right outside his window, whistling his own breath back to him, note for note. The storm rolled in just after midnight. Sam had been half asleep in the ranger station, wrapped in a wool blanket, the fire crackling low. The wind picked up slowly at first, then all at once, as if something massive had inhaled and was now exhaling across the mountain. He sat up, listening. The windows rattled. Snow tapped at the glass, not in gusts but in patterns, like a fingertip dragging across it. He got up and checked the radio. Still dead. No static. No signal, just dead silence. The kind of silence that made your ears ring. He should have stayed inside. He knew he should have. But when he looked out the window and saw the flickering light, like a lantern swaying just beyond the tree line, he grabbed his coat and stepped out. The cold was immediate, cutting, like walking into a sheet of ice. The snow whipped sideways in the wind, and visibility dropped to just a few feet. But the light was there. Faint, moving. He followed it. It led him past the supply shed, down the ridge, to the edge of the hollow. The whistled tree stood black against the snow, unmoving. But the light wasn't coming from there. It was hovering just beyond the next slope. Then it vanished. Sam stopped, turned in a slow circle. That's when he saw them. Two red eyes, like coals in the whiteout. They blinked. He froze. Not deer, not a wolf, not a bear. The eyes were too high, taller than a man, and they weren't reflecting light. They were the light. Steady, watching. A second pair blinked open, to the right. Then a third. Sam stumbled backward. Snow clung to his eyelashes. The wind roared. And then the sound started. Not a growl, not a howl. Something worse. A chorus of breathy, off-key whistles. The same tune. The same rhythm. Dozens of them, layered and overlapping like a choir with no mouths. He ran. Branches lashed his face as he tore through the trees. The snow made everything slippery, and the ground didn't seem solid anymore. Like the forest was shifting beneath his feet. The whistles chased him, changing pitch. Closer now. When he finally saw the warm glow of the cabin lights, he didn't stop to look back. He slammed the door shut and locked it, chest heaving, frost caked in his beard. Silence. Then, a soft, single whistle from outside. Then another. He shut off the lights, sat in the dark, gun across his lap. The red eyes stayed just beyond the trees until sunrise. They didn't blink again. The snow eased up by morning, but the woods didn't feel any safer. Sam stood at the edge of the ridge trail, staring at the grove where he'd seen the glowing red eyes the night before. There were no prints in the snow, no broken branches, just that unnatural silence again, like the entire forest had stopped breathing. Back at the ranger station, he flipped through old logs out of instinct. Something about the air, about this entire preserve, made his skin crawl, like something watched between the trees. That's when he found it. A box tucked behind a row of outdated trail maps and weather manuals. Inside, a weathered brown leather notebook. The spine cracked as he opened it. The first page was dated January 3rd, 1994. If you're reading this, you've seen it too. The writing belonged to a ranger named Calvin Rhodes. Sam had never heard the name, but the tone of the entries was clear. Rhodes had patrolled this very preserve 30 years ago, and the deeper Sam read, the more disturbing the entries became. I saw the eyes, same as everyone else before they left. Some folks tried to call it wildlife, but wildlife doesn't whisper your name in the wind. Sam turned the page. There were dozens more entries, some rambling, others tight with panic. Rhodes described the GPS blackouts, the unnatural cold near the pine grove, the way time felt, bent. The snow doesn't fall the same out here, Rhodes wrote. It hangs in the air like it's waiting, like it's listening. I've lost track of how long I've been out here. I think I'm forgetting things. I think the forest is doing it. Sam kept reading. He couldn't stop. Rhodes had begun tracking something he called the hollow, a depression in the frozen forest floor where all compass needles spun wildly, where voices whispered from beneath the snow. Then came the final entries, shaky handwriting, ink blotched from what looked like melted snow. It watches through the trees. I've stopped using my radio. The last time I did, something answered in my voice. And the last full sentence chilled Sam to the core. The forest remembers. The last few pages were ripped out. Sam ran his hand over the jagged tear, heart pounding. Outside, the wind picked up again, and just like that, he heard it. A single whistle, low and clear. It sounded exactly like him. The notebook haunted Sam. Every word, every sentence felt like a breadcrumb pointing toward something just out of reach. He couldn't shake the thought. Rhodes had found something real, something buried deep beneath the snow. And if that hollow still existed, maybe the truth hadn't frozen over yet. Sam packed light, a headlamp, a fixed-blade knife, a portable radio, and a spare thermal blanket. He tucked Rhodes' journal into his coat, just in case he needed to retrace the ranger's last steps. Snow had begun to fall again when he reached the grove. The trees were taller here, ancient-looking pines with black bark and thick branches that clawed into the sky. Everything about this part of the forest felt off. The wind didn't whistle. It groaned. Following the journal's rough map, Sam scanned the area for anything unusual, broken branches, elevation dips, or unnatural stillness. And then he saw it, a soft depression in the snow, surrounded by a ring of trees that bent slightly inward, as if bowing toward the center. When Sam stepped inside the ring, the wind stopped completely. Even the air felt wrong, denser, like breathing underwater. He crouched, brushing away a layer of frost, revealing ice-covered rock beneath. There, hidden in the stone, was a narrow slit, barely visible. But when he leaned in, a current of cold air blew upward, sharp as a knife and smelling of iron and old earth. He found a small passage, wide enough for a person if they squeezed sideways. Without thinking twice, he pressed in. The tunnel was slick, the walls like glass. His headlamp flickered once, then held steady. The further down he went, the more the air changed. Colder, yes, but heavier too. Like it carried memory. The tunnel opened into a chamber, and what he saw inside didn't make sense. A circle of carved stones stood in the middle, covered in symbols, runes that matched the ones Rhodes had sketched in the back of his journal. Along the walls were bones, arranged like patterns. Human bones, animal bones, and all of them pointed toward the circle. There were no footprints, no signs of disturbance, just silence and one sound. A voice. It didn't echo in the cave, and it wasn't coming through the air. It was inside his head, slow, whispering syllables in a language he couldn't understand, except for one word. Stay. The moment he heard it, Sam staggered back. The rock beneath his boots cracked. Ice split along the edge of the chamber, and a low hum filled the space. The same sound he'd heard in his dreams since arriving. The same whistle. The same voice. He reached for his radio, hand shaking, and clicked the mic. Base, this is Whitaker. I found something. It's not just a forest. Before he could finish, the light blinked out, and the voice came again, louder, closer. Stay. There was a moment, standing at the edge of the hollow, when Sam nearly turned back. The wind was screaming through the trees like a dying animal, the kind of noise that settled in your chest and made your ribs feel brittle. But the journal in his pocket seemed to burn against his side, like it had weight, like it was pushing him forward. He adjusted the straps on his pack, pulled the radio up one last time, and tried again. Station 1, this is Ranger Whitaker. I'm entering the ice hollow. If you don't hear from me in 2 hours, send someone. Static. Just that, and nothing else. No crackle, no hiss, no flicker of voice. Sam wasn't sure if anyone had heard him. He wasn't even sure the station was still there. The mouth of the hollow wasn't what he expected. It wasn't a cave, not really. More like a wound torn into the earth, narrow and slick with a frost that seemed unnatural. It didn't feel like snow. It felt like something alive had breathed it out. Sam lowered himself slowly, feet crunching on a layer of hoarfrost that covered stone steps. Man-made, maybe, or maybe older than anything he could name. The cold deepened with every step, not just physical cold, but something mental, emotional, like the warmth was being pulled out of his memories. 50 steps down, the wind cut off completely. Silence. Then a drip. A steady, rhythmic drip echoing through what now looked like an enormous underground chamber. Part cavern, part ruin. Mossy rock met carved columns that had no business being this deep in the Pennsylvania wilderness. Symbols lined the walls, circular and interlocked, like eyes looking in from every direction. And then he heard it, the voice. Not from ahead, from within. It didn't speak words. It stirred something in his head. Images. A fire tower. A man hiding beneath floorboards. A forest covered in fog. And a shape. Huge, gliding just above the trees. Sam staggered against the wall, breathing hard. He turned the corner, following the journal's map. The passages narrowed, then widened into what looked like a chamber meant for gathering. Benches or altars, carved from a greenish-black stone, sat in a circle. And in the center, buried halfway in the ice, was a figure. A ranger's uniform. Faded. Torn. He knelt down, brushing frost from the badge. Ranger Del Monroe. The one who'd gone missing in 1995. Sam didn't have time to react. From behind him, a click. The soft crackle of ice giving way. He spun around. Something had entered the room, or had been there the whole time. It looked almost human. Tall, lean, but its skin shimmered like frost under moonlight. No face, no eyes, and when it moved, it made no sound. But in Sam's mind, a whisper bloomed. "You came to look? Now you'll remember." Every thought in Sam's mind began to freeze over. Memories of warmth, his old job, his sister's laugh, the scent of coffee, all replaced with snow-covered trees and red eyes blinking in the dark. He grabbed the journal, flipping to the last page. Del Monroe had written a single line. "It remembers for us, and we for it." Sam dropped the book and ran. Back through the tunnels, his flashlight flickering, the walls warping around him like heat waves. But cold, so cold. As he reached the stairs, the whisper chased him, louder now, desperate. "Stay? Stay? Stay?" He burst out into the blizzard, collapsed into the snow, and screamed into his dead radio. "It's not just a forest, it remembers." And then the wind took it, and Sam was gone. The storm passed 3 days later. By then, the search had already started. A team of rangers and local volunteers swept the eastern trails of Allegheny Ridge, shouting Sam Whitaker's name into a forest that refused to echo. Snow hung thick on the pines, unusually heavy for March, as if the whole forest was trying to bury something. They found the snowmobile first, parked just off Trail 19. No signs of a struggle. Keys still in the ignition. Sam's tracks led away from it, clear at first, but then stopped abruptly, like he'd vanished mid-step. Not drifted over, just ended. A week went by, then two. People began saying the same things they said when Ranger Monroe disappeared in '95. He probably ran off. Could be mental illness. Those woods do strange things to a man alone. But no one believed it, not really. It wasn't until the third week that they found the tree. A massive pine, older than anything around it. Its trunk was blackened, not by fire, but something else. Something colder. A single phrase had been carved into the bark, deep and fresh. He stayed. Right below it, lying in the snow, was Sam's journal. The last few pages were missing, ripped cleanly out. But stuffed between the remaining pages was a micro-recorder. The kind old-school rangers used when logging notes in the field. It had one file. The timestamp read March 12th, 3:03 a.m. They hit play. Nothing but wind at first. Then a faint voice, Sam's, barely above a whisper. It's beneath the ice. It remembers names, faces, things we forget. A long pause. I think it's waiting for someone who won't leave. Another pause, and then something else. Not words. A sound. A voice not quite human whispering over and over, right against the mic. Something that no one could fully translate. Some said it was a name. Others thought it was coordinates. One ranger swore it was saying, "We trade warmth for memory." The tape ended with static. The forest never gave Sam back. His cabin remains empty, bed still made, flashlight still on the table. Rangers who stay overnight at the station closest to Birch Pass claim they hear footsteps outside around 3 a.m. Just one pair, crunching softly through the snow, always stopping at the porch. Sometimes, the wind sounds like it's whistling a name. And if you hike deep enough into the preserve, people say you'll find that same tree. The bark colder than the air around it. The words still fresh. He stayed.